They say it's in the expressions, the tones, the little signals people give off without realizing it. But looking back now, I don't think anyone would have suspected anything was wrong with us. Not in the early days. Back then, our house on Maplewood Drive smelled like fresh coffee in the mornings, and laughter echoed from room to room. I used to wake up before the kids, slip downstairs, and listen to the quiet before the day began. I thought that meant peace. Mike and I met when we were 25. He was funny, charming, the type who made bartenders laugh and pulled chairs out for strangers. I fell in love with the version of him who held open doors and talked about his dreams. But dreams have a way of dissolving when life gets heavy. I just didn't know how heavy things would become. In those early years, he worked in IT and genuinely cared about his job. He'd come home excited about new projects, and we'd take the kids to the aquarium on weekends. "Sophie, show Daddy the jellyfish drawing you made," I'd say, and he'd scoop her up like she weighed nothing. Sometimes I replay those moments, wondering if they were real or just the calm before a storm I refused to see forming. Things began shifting around the time he turned 40. At first, it was small, coming home later, complaining about his boss, staring at his phone more than talking to us. I chalked it up to stress. Everyone goes through phases, right? That's what I kept telling myself. But phases don't grow into monsters. People do. One night when I walked in after a 12-hour shift, the house was dark except for the blue glow of the TV washing over Mike's face. Ethan and Sophie were sitting silently at the kitchen table, pushing cold pasta around their plates. "Hey," I whispered, brushing Ethan's hair back. "Why didn't you eat?" He shrugged. "Daddy didn't want dinner yet." It was the first time I felt something crack inside me. Not big, not loud, just a tiny fissure under my ribs. I ignored it, but cracks spread. If I had to pinpoint when everything truly changed, I'd say it was one rainy Friday night. I came home to the sound of Mike slamming a cabinet door and muttering curses under his breath. The kids were huddled on the couch, frozen like deer. I tried to stay calm, setting my bag down quietly. "Long day?" I asked him, keeping my voice gentle. He didn't look at me. "Why are you late?" It wasn't the words. It was the tone. Sharp. Suspicious. Like I'd been somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. I showed him the badge swipe from work once, thinking proof mattered. It didn't. He didn't care about the truth. He cared about control. The drinking crept in slowly, too. First a beer after work, then two, then a six-pack disappearing every 2 nights. He'd sit on the couch scrolling endlessly, his thumb flicking like it had a life of its own. Gambling apps became his new obsession. I'd hear him muttering, "Just one more try," long after midnight. And when the money ran low, the anger ran high. "Why is the hydro bill so damn much?" he snapped one evening, waving the statement in my face. "Because it's February, Mike. We need heat." He scoffed. "You always have an excuse, don't you? Always spending." Meanwhile, I was the one budgeting groceries, patching Ethan's torn backpack, buying Sophie's school supplies with coupons. But when people saw us, the neighbors, teachers, strangers, Mike flashed that friendly smile like the world still adored him. And they did. His charm hadn't died. He just stopped sharing it with us. I caught Linda, our neighbor, one afternoon by the mailbox. "Your husband is so helpful," she said. "He offered to bring in our packages while we were away." I forced a smile. "Yeah, he's thoughtful." But I knew the truth. Those gestures were masks, carefully placed so no one would see the rot underneath. At home, he mocked everything I did. The cleaning, the meals, the schedules. When I'd try to explain that the kids needed structure, he'd roll his eyes. "They're fine. Stop acting like you're the only one who knows anything." The worst part wasn't the yelling. It was how small he made us feel. How our silence became our safety. Children shouldn't know how to tiptoe around a parent like he's a landmine. But Ethan and Sophie learned early. They learned the difference between a beer can on the counter and an empty six-pack in the recycling bin. They learned that when Mike said, "I'm fine," they were supposed to disappear. One evening I walked into the hallway and saw Sophie, 6 years old, drawing with her small hand shaking slightly. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" I asked softly. She turned the paper toward me. It was our house, but instead of sunshine or flowers, she'd drawn dark clouds hovering over the roof. Tiny stick figure versions of us stood outside. Mike's figure had scribbles for eyes. My heart cracked wide open. "Baby, what's this?" She looked up with big, honest eyes. "The sky is sad." I held her, swallowing tears. Kids always know more than we want them to. Ethan wasn't coping much better. His teachers emailed saying he'd grown quieter, more withdrawn. Homework that he used to tackle with excitement now sat crumpled in his backpack. One night, after Mike had passed out on the couch, Ethan came into my room. "Mama," he whispered, voice trembling. "Why doesn't Papa love us like he used to?" I squeezed him tight. "He does love you. He just has a problem right now." But even as I said it, I felt the lie sting. Love doesn't look like fear. Love doesn't silence children. One night during dinner, when I served leftover soup, Mike took a bite and pushed the bowl away. "This tastes awful. Why do you bother cooking if you can't even get it right?" The kids froze. Ethan stared at his lap. Sophie held her spoon in midair. I clenched my jaw. "They like it. Please just eat with us." He glared. "Don't tell me what to do in my house." His house, as if the rest of us were intruders. Later that night, I found Ethan writing in a notebook, drawing check marks next to chores he'd done, like he was trying to be good enough to calm the storm. "Maybe if I'm better," he whispered, "Dad won't be mad." That was when fear turned into something else, something stronger, something like resolve. I started documenting everything, every insult, every slammed door, every night he stumbled to bed reeking of beer. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted safety. I saved receipts, printed bank statements, took pictures of broken items. I knew enough from the hospital to understand patterns of emotional abuse, even when the bruises weren't physical. I reached out quietly to a family therapist. We met in an office that smelled like lavender and old paper. "Sarah," she said gently, "your children are showing signs of chronic stress. You need to consider next steps." Next steps. 2 words that felt heavier than all the others. Meanwhile, Mike's behavior didn't improve. He stopped pretending around me, though he still turned on the neighbor-friendly charm whenever someone else was watching. He'd criticize my outfits before work. "You look tired. That's the best you could do today?" Or he'd shake his head when I tried to clean. "You never do anything right." Some nights, after I tucked in the kids, I'd sit on the edge of my bed, knees pulled to my chest, trying to figure out when I stopped being a wife and became a target. Then came the night that changed everything. Mike had passed out drunk on the couch, snoring loudly. His phone slipped from his hand, and the empty beer cans clattered to the floor. The kids stood at the bottom of the stairs, wide-eyed. I swallowed hard, beckoning them. "Come here," I whispered. They tiptoed over. I knelt down, one arm around each of them. "We're going to get help," I said softly. "We're going to make our home safe again." Ethan looked uncertain. "What if he wakes up?" "He won't," I whispered. "Not tonight." That was the first time I felt a sliver of hope. A small, fragile thing, but alive. I contacted legal counsel the next morning, quietly, carefully, one step at a time. I didn't know how long the road would be, but I knew this. The house no longer belonged to fear. It was time to reclaim it. Leaving wasn't a dramatic escape. It was a slow, careful unraveling. I arranged therapy appointments for the kids, met with legal advisors, and talked to my supervisor at the hospital about flexible scheduling. Some days were still hard. The kids flinched at loud noises, and I found myself double-checking locks out of habit. But little by little, the air began to change. I remember the first morning that felt different. Sophie woke up early, padding into my room with messy hair and sleepy eyes. "Mama," she whispered, "can we have pancakes?" I smiled. "Yeah, baby, we can." We made them together, her tiny hands stirring the batter while Ethan set the table. There was no shouting, no criticism, just the soft sound of a whisk against a bowl and the faint smell of cinnamon. We began reclaiming traditions, movie nights, walks by the water, simple dinners without tension. I was still cautious, still documenting, still preparing for the inevitable confrontation with Mike when the truth finally hit him. He didn't understand boundaries or responsibility, but for the first time, I felt strong enough to face it. One evening, Linda caught me outside taking the trash out. "You look different lately," she said gently. "Lighter." I didn't tell her everything, but I did say, "We're working on making things better." She nodded knowingly. "You're a good mom, Sarah." I didn't feel like a hero. I just felt like someone who finally stepped out of a burning room. Even now, the townhouse carries the faint scents of coffee and cinnamon. Some nights the shadows still feel heavier than they should. But I watch the kids laugh again. Real laughter, the kind that shakes their shoulders. And I realize healing doesn't happen in leaps. It happens in small breaths, steady steps, tiny victories. And every step away from fear is a step toward freedom. Love should never require silence, fear, or shrinking yourself to survive. A home is meant to be a place of safety, so when someone turns it into a battlefield, the bravest and most loving thing you can do is fight for peace, even if that means walking away. Courage isn't loud. Sometimes it is a whisper that says, "My family deserves better," and choosing to build a safer future one step at a time. I used to believe our home on Willow Creek Lane was the kind of place you only saw in small-town postcards. Maple leaves swirling in the breeze, the windows glowing warm at dusk, and the smell of cookies drifting out into the crisp Portland evening air. When John and I first moved in after college, we painted the walls together, laughing as we left handprints behind the oven like secret signatures. Lily was born 2 years later, then Noah, and for a long time I thought we had built something unshakable. Back then, John would bring me flowers for no reason, little grocery store bouquets wrapped in crinkled paper. He'd sneak them into my car or place them on the kitchen counter with a scribbled note, "For my favorite person." I saved every note inside a shoebox under our bed. I couldn't tell you why. Maybe part of me feared good things never lasted, even before I had proof. But life has its own way of shifting, gradually at first, then all at once, like watching a crack form along a glass window pane. At first it's tiny, barely visible, then suddenly the whole surface splinters, and you wonder how you missed the signs. What happened to us wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, a quiet unraveling. One late night, one lie, one unanswered question at a time. And this is how it happened. I remember the first time I felt John drifting. It was early autumn, one of those Portland evenings when the air smells like rain even before the storm arrives. I'd cooked spaghetti, John's favorite, back when he still smiled at me across the table. The kids were chattering, Lily showing off a drawing from school, Noah excited about a science project he'd glued crookedly. John walked through the door at nearly 8 p.m., shirt wrinkled, hair flattened on one side like he'd been leaning against something, or someone. He kissed the kids good evening, but when I stepped toward him, he gave me a distracted pat on the shoulder. "Long day?" I asked. "Deadlines, Em. Can we not start tonight?" He opened his laptop immediately, his fingers tapping before his coat was even hung. There was no argument, no explosion, just distance. A space between us that used to be filled with stories about our day, inside jokes, or plans for the weekend. Later that week, I found the first sign. A perfume scent, sweet, unfamiliar, clinging faintly to his collar. I pressed it to my nose twice just to be sure. John never wore cologne. He always said it made him sneeze. When I asked him casually that night, he barely blinked. Probably someone at the office brushed past me. "Why are you sniffing my clothes anyway?" His laugh was light, careless. Mine was forced. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was tired from school and the 100 emotional fires I put out every day as a counselor. I convinced myself I trusted him, or at least that I should. But Lily noticed before I was ready to admit anything. One night as I tucked her in, she whispered, "Mom, why does Daddy look so sad lately?" Did I do something wrong? I shook my head quickly. "No, sweetheart, nothing you did." She stared at me with those big eyes that always saw more than I wanted her to. That night, as the house settled into its evening stillness, John beside me on the bed scrolling through his phone, I felt the first pang of fear that something precious was slipping through my fingers, and I didn't know how to hold on to it anymore. By the end of September, the signs were everywhere, so visible that denial became its own exhausting job. John started coming home later and later, each excuse polished, practiced. Client meeting ran long. Traffic was insane. You know the firm's short-staffed. Every explanation was delivered with a tired sigh, like my questions were burdens he didn't deserve to carry. One Thursday evening, I discovered a receipt in his wallet from a downtown restaurant I'd never heard of. 2 entrees, wine, and a dessert we hadn't ordered together in years. When I asked, he didn't even look up from his phone. "Lunch meeting, Emma. You're overthinking again." His calmness stung more than anger would have. It made me feel hysterical, unreasonable, even though something inside me whispered I wasn't wrong. Lily sensed everything. She'd hover near the dining room doorway when John came home, as if bracing herself. Noah became clingier, often crawling into my lap during dinner. He would stare anxiously between John and me, waiting for some invisible cue that told him whether the night was safe. One evening after putting the kids to bed, I found John standing outside on the deck, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, tinged with a chuckle I hadn't heard aimed at me in months. "I told you I'm handling it. No, she has no clue." My heart hammered. When he came back inside, he looked startled to see me. "Who was that?" I asked softly. "Work." A beat of silence. "You really need to stop being so suspicious." Suspicious. The word felt like a slap. Later that night, I sat on the bathroom floor with the door locked, staring at the tiles. I realized I was terrified. Terrified of the truth. Terrified of breaking our family. Terrified of what staying silent would teach our children. I started documenting. Small things at first. Dates, times, screenshots of text messages I wasn't meant to see. I felt guilty every time, like I was betraying him by acknowledging what he might be doing. But something deeper inside, something maternal, primal, told me to prepare, to protect my kids, to protect myself. Autumn leaves were beginning to fall outside, but inside our home, something colder was settling, and no amount of pretending would stop it. It happened on a Wednesday. A simple day, nothing special. I had a parent-teacher meeting scheduled, and when it ended early, I decided to surprise John with takeout. Maybe we could talk, reconnect, salvage something. When I walked up the driveway, I saw an unfamiliar car parked out front. Sleek, shiny, too new for any of our friends. My stomach tightened. I approached the house slowly, takeout bag swinging in my trembling hand. Through the living room window, I saw them. John and a young woman, pretty, smiling, her legs brushing his under the coffee table. He laughed, a soft, intimate laugh I hadn't heard in months. It didn't feel real. It felt like watching someone else's life unravel. I stepped into the house quietly. They didn't notice at first. The woman was touching his arm, leaning in. John's posture was relaxed, comfortable, familiar in a way that made my heart crack open. "John," I said, barely recognizing my own voice. He jolted upright. The woman froze. "What is going on?" I asked, the words shaking out of me. John rubbed the back of his neck, trying to act casual. "Emma, this is harmless. Just a coworker. You're overreacting." Overreacting? The word hit me harder than the betrayal itself. The young woman muttered something about leaving and practically ran out the door. John didn't chase her, but the guilt on his face was unmistakable. I set the takeout bag on the counter and stood there in silence, waiting for him to say something real. He didn't. He just sighed and said, "You always do this, Emma. You twist things. You make everything harder than it needs to be." For the first time in months, anger replaced fear. "John, I saw you. I saw everything." But he shook his head slowly, like I was a child who didn't understand the rules. That night, he slept in the guest room. I lay awake listening to the faint hum of the heater, my heart beat loud in the dark, and I knew, deep in my bones, that something irreversible had happened. A line crossed, a truth exposed. The life I thought we had was gone, and pretending wasn't an option anymore. The next few weeks were a blur of quiet planning, not dramatic, not cinematic, just the slow, steady gathering of courage one practical step at a time. If John sensed anything, he pretended he didn't. I confided in my sister Claire first. She showed up at my door that evening with a bottle of tea, a warm sweater, and eyes full of worry. "Emma," she whispered, "you don't deserve this." I felt myself break a little in her arms. She helped me organize everything: documents, finances, safety plans. She reminded me of things I'd forgotten: passwords, shared accounts, even the importance of keeping the kids' routines consistent while things shifted silently beneath the surface. I contacted a family lawyer. Quietly, carefully. She spoke to me with the gentleness of someone who'd seen too many women in my position. "You're doing the right thing," she told me. "Your safety and your children's emotional stability matter more than keeping up appearances." Lily and Noah sensed the change, though I tried to keep life as normal as possible. Homework, dinners, bedtime stories. But the tension in the house pressed against us like thick fog. One night, Lily crawled into my lap and whispered, "Mom, are you and Daddy mad at each other?" I swallowed hard. "Sweetheart, adults have problems sometimes, but none of it is your fault." "But are we safe?" she asked, her voice barely audible. That question nearly broke me. "Yes," I said firmly, holding her tighter. "I promise you're safe." John grew more distant, more secretive. He guarded his phone like it contained state secrets. He left for hours without explanation. But he still played the charming husband in public, making jokes at dinner with friends, wrapping his arm around my waist for show. Only I felt the way his hand trembled. Only I heard the bitterness behind his laugh. Only I saw how his eyes avoided mine when Margaret, his mother, asked gently, "Are you two doing all right?" I said we were fine. John nodded along, but the truth was already set in motion. I wasn't staying. I was preparing to walk away from the man I once loved, to rebuild something safer for my children, something honest, even if it meant starting from scratch. The night everything changed wasn't filled with shouting. It didn't erupt in chaos or slamming doors. It was quiet, eerily quiet, like the calm before a long overdue storm. John came home late again, smelling faintly of cologne he never used to wear. He tossed his keys on the table and grabbed a beer from the fridge. I watched him from across the room, hands folded in my lap, heart steady in a way it hadn't been for months. "John," I said softly, "we need to talk." He exhaled sharply. "Emma, I'm tired. Can this wait?" "No," I replied, standing. "It can't." He looked at me then, really looked. but there was no remorse in his eyes. Just irritation. Maybe fear. I couldn't tell anymore. "I know about everything," I said. "And I'm done pretending. I've talked to a lawyer." His face tightened. "You're being dramatic." "No, John. I'm being a mother." He scoffed. "So what? You're taking the kids away from me now?" "I'm giving them stability," I said. "Something you haven't given us for a long time." Silence filled the room. Heavy. Final. He looked down, maybe realizing the ground had shifted beneath him. "Emma, I didn't mean for any of this." "I know," I said quietly, "but intention doesn't undo harm." He slumped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. For the first time, he looked small, lost, and I felt a pang of grief, not for him, but for the life we'd once had. The next morning, I told Lily and Noah that things were going to change. I didn't give details, just reassurance, love, stability. Lily nodded solemnly. She was old enough to understand more than I wanted her to. Noah crawled into my lap, whispering, "Are we still a family?" "Yes," I said, kissing his forehead. "A different shape maybe, but still a family." Claire helped us pack essentials. The kids' favorite toys, clothes, important documents. We didn't rush. We didn't panic. We simply moved forward. When I finally closed the door behind us, suitcase in hand, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Breath, space, possibility. Leaving didn't feel like losing. It felt like choosing hope over fear. And for the first time in months, I believed we were going to be okay. When I look back now, I can almost pinpoint the exact moment things started to shift, though at the time I brushed it off like lint on a sweater. Mark and I had been married for 9 years, most of them steady and uneventful in the best possible way. We had our routines, lazy Sunday mornings with burnt pancakes, evening walks around the neighborhood, and the comforting hum of a life built on small, consistent habits. Our house wasn't big, just a 2-story place in the suburbs with peeling paint in the hallway and a perpetually dripping bathroom faucet. But it was ours. Mark used to be the kind of man who laughed loudly, talked openly, and slept deeply. But somewhere between promotions, deadlines, and late-night emails from his job, the brightness in him dimmed. At first, I thought it was simple exhaustion, stress, the kind every adult carries like invisible luggage. He assured me, "I'm fine, Em, just tired." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. But then the nights grew strange. He'd stay awake long after midnight, pacing the living room, muttering under his breath. When I asked who he was talking to, he'd reply, "Just working things out." Eventually, he moved his late-night rituals to the basement and insisted I never go down there. "It's a mess," he always said. "I'll clean it." But I heard things, scraping sounds, tapping, shifts of weight across the floorboards. And sometimes, whispers. His whispers. Little by little, the man I married faded, replaced with someone tense, jumpy, and watchful. Someone who checked every window twice. Someone who said things like, "They want you, not me," with absolute conviction. I wish I'd pushed harder. I wish I'd gone into that basement sooner. But I didn't. And because of that, everything that came after still follows me like a shadow. The first real sign that something was wrong came on a Wednesday night in early autumn. I woke to the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, pacing footsteps beneath the bedroom floor. I rolled over, expecting to see Mark reaching for his robe like he sometimes did when insomnia gnawed at him. But the bed beside me was empty. "Mark?" I whispered. No answer. The footsteps stopped abruptly. Then, faintly, I heard him speaking. Not loudly, just enough for me to catch the rhythm of conversation, the pause between phrases, the rise and fall of a voice responding to someone. Except he was alone. I stood at the top of the basement stairs, hugging my arms around myself. Light flickered below, a bulb struggling or a shadow passing. I wasn't sure. I called out again, "Mark? Honey? Who are you talking to?" His footsteps halted. Silence spilled up from the basement like cold air. Then he answered, voice tight, controlled. "Just go back to bed, Emily." The door was half closed, but I caught a glimpse of him. Shoulders tense, head bowed slightly like he was listening to someone standing inches from him. Only no one was there. The next morning, he acted normal, making coffee, humming softly, kissing my cheek like he used to. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it, but when I tried to talk about the noises, he brushed past me. "Stress makes your mind fill in blanks," he said. "You're overthinking." He wasn't angry. That almost made it worse. He was calm, too calm, detached. Over the next week, he began checking the locks compulsively. The deadbolt would click 3 times, then 3 more. "Just making sure," he muttered, eyes darting toward the basement door. One night he whispered, "They want you, not me," with a conviction that rooted fear so deep inside me, I still feel echoes of it. I asked him who they were. He just smiled. Too long, too stiff, like someone imitating human expression. That was the moment I began to be afraid of my own husband. After that night, the house stopped feeling like home. Even during the day, shadows seemed to linger longer than they should. I caught myself glancing over my shoulder while chopping vegetables, convinced for a split second someone was standing behind me. Mark's behavior grew stranger. He'd leave for work but return minutes later because a window felt unlocked. He installed new deadbolts, then added chains, then checked everything twice before bed. Sometimes he stood frozen at the kitchen window, staring at nothing. One evening, I found him sitting on the basement steps, the door cracked open. His face was pale, sweaty. "Mark, what are you doing?" He didn't look at me. "Listening." "For what?" He swallowed hard, fingers trembling. "Just don't go down there, Em. Promise me." His fear felt genuine, raw. But fear of what? I couldn't tell. The whispers at night became more distinct. Not words I could understand, but an urgency, like conversations mid-argument. I'd wake and find Mark gone, the basement light shuddering as if someone walked past it. During the day, I felt watched, even alone. The living room curtains would be slightly open when I knew I left them shut. The spare bedroom door would be ajar, though Mark said he never went in there. And every time I passed the basement door, a chill crept up my spine. One afternoon, while Mark was at work, I heard something beneath the floorboards. Slow scraping, like furniture being dragged. I froze mid-step. Then came a series of soft taps, 3 rhythmic knocks. My phone buzzed and I nearly screamed. It was Mark texting. "Don't go downstairs, promise me, Em. Just trust me." He never texted me from work. Never. When he got home, he seemed exhausted. Eyes bloodshot, shoulders slumping. "You're not safe," he whispered. "From what?" He stared at me long enough that my skin prickled. "From him." I wanted to ask who he meant, but the answer, whatever it was, felt too terrifying to hear. I lasted 3 more weeks before the fear of not knowing outweighed the fear of the truth. It was a Tuesday. Mark left for work unusually calm, even giving me a tight, lingering hug. "Be safe today," he said, brushing a stray hair behind my ear. "Please." His tenderness unnerved me. It felt like a goodbye. For hours after he left, the house was still, unsettlingly still. I kept glancing toward the basement door. Something in me knew that if I didn't find answers now, I might never get another chance. My hands shook as I gripped the basement railing. The air grew colder with each step. Halfway down, the smell hit me, a harsh chemical sting that made my eyes water. Bleach. A lot of it. The light was on, flickering. I reached the bottom stair and froze. The basement was cleaner than I'd ever seen it. Too clean. The concrete floor looked scrubbed raw. Shelves were wiped down. Even the old paint cans were neatly stacked. Then I saw the wall. Photos. Dozens of them. All of me. Me sleeping. Me cooking. Me reading on the couch. Me brushing my teeth. All taken from inside the house. Some from angles that made my stomach twist. My breath hitched. What is this? Pinned in the center, written in Mark's handwriting, was a note. I'm trying to protect you from him. My knees nearly gave out. Behind me, a floorboard creaked. I spun, heart racing, but no one was there. Yet I felt something. Presence. Awareness. As if the air itself was watching. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Emily, leave the basement. Now. Before I could move, another message. He's close. My hands went cold. The photos blurred through my tears as I stumbled back up the stairs. I slammed the basement door shut and locked it, though part of me knew a simple lock meant nothing. Something was happening to Mark. Something dangerous. Something fractured. But everything I'd seen made one thing clear. Whatever he feared was inside this house. Maybe even inside himself. Mark came home earlier than usual, his face ashen when he saw me. You went downstairs. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. I nodded slowly. Mark, what's happening to you? He sank onto the couch like his legs gave out. He didn't look angry. He looked broken. I told you not to go. That isn't an answer. He rubbed his face hard like he was trying to erase something. I've been losing time, Emily. His voice quivered. Hours, sometimes whole nights. I wake up in the basement with no memory of what I was doing, or who I was talking to. My throat tightened. Talking to who? He shook his head frantically. No one. Myself. But it doesn't feel like me. It feels like someone else wearing my skin. His words chilled me deeper than any ghost story ever could. I hear him, Mark whispered. In my head. Telling me you're in danger. Telling me he can keep you safe if I let him take over. Mark, I said, inching closer. You need help. Real help. He laughed, a sound fraying at the edges. Help. Emily, you don't understand. I'm trying to protect you. From who? I asked softly. His eyes lifted to mine, and the fear in them was unmistakable. From the other me. The one that wants you gone. A silence so heavy it pressed into my bones filled the room. I didn't know what to say, what to do. I wanted to run. I wanted to hold him. I wanted to scream. Sometimes, he whispered, I hear him telling me to hurt you. I don't want to. God, I don't want to. But what if one night I'm not strong enough? His voice cracked then, the sound of a man terrified of himself. Emily, I'm losing the fight. I reached for his hand, hesitant, trembling, wondering if the man I loved was still somewhere behind those terrified eyes. But one thought repeated itself in my mind, louder than reason. If he feared himself, how could I not fear him too? The next morning I made a choice. I packed a small bag while Mark slept, his breathing uneven and restless. Every zip of the suitcase felt like betrayal. Every folded shirt felt like goodbye. But staying felt like gambling with something I couldn't risk. My life, or his. When he woke, he found me at the kitchen table, keys in hand, bag at my feet. He froze. You're leaving? His voice was soft, devastated. I nodded. Just for now. I need to be safe. And you need help, real help. not bleach and locked doors and whispered warnings. He sank into the chair across from me, his hands trembling violently. "I don't want to hurt you, Emily. I swear I don't." "I know," I whispered. "That's why I'm going." Tears filled his eyes. Not dramatic, not loud, just slow and exhausted. "I'm scared." "I am too." He reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. I didn't pull away, though every instinct screamed at me to. "Promise me you'll come back," he said. "I'll come back when it's safe, for both of us." He nodded slowly, like a man surrendering to a truth he never wanted to face. "I'll get help," he said. "I'll try. I don't want to be this." I believed him. I truly did. But I still stood, still lifted my bag, still walked toward the door. As I reached for the handle, he spoke one last time. "If he ever shows up again, don't trust him." The words made my blood run cold. "I won't," I said. I stepped outside into the cool morning air, letting the door shut behind me. The sky was gray, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. As I drove away, I didn't look back. Some stories aren't meant to be watched from the rearview mirror. Some stories you leave behind before they sink into your skin. When someone you love begins to lose themselves, compassion matters, but so does safety. You cannot save someone by sacrificing your own well-being. Courage isn't always staying. Sometimes real courage is knowing when to walk away and seek help before pain turns to tragedy. Long before my world began to unravel, I believed my life on Maple Avenue was steady, simple, even comforting. When Greg and I first moved into the modest 3-bedroom apartment in Seattle, I thought we were building something solid. The rain-washed windows, the evergreen trees dripping outside our balcony, the muffled hum of evening traffic, they all felt like pieces of a quiet, ordinary life I could trust. Back then, Greg was attentive in a way that felt flattering. He organized our kitchen pantry like it was a project worth presenting, folded laundry with crisp precision, and read parenting books before we even decided to try for a baby. Friends joked that I had married the most reliable man in Washington. When Liam was born, Greg took fatherhood as though it were an exam he needed to ace. At first, I thought it was sweet. He timed bottles, tracked naps, researched car seat safety, like he was preparing for a courtroom battle. I brushed off the tension in his voice when he double-checked the locks at night or asked me if Liam's cough sounded different. It all seemed rooted in love. But over time, something in Greg shifted. It wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet, creeping, like the slow spread of mold behind wallpaper. He scrutinized everything. The toys Liam touched at daycare, the handrails in public parks, the children Liam wanted playdates with. One evening, when Liam was barely 5, I walked into the living room and found Greg pacing in circles, whispering to himself like he was working through a math problem only he understood. "Everything has to be perfect," he muttered, hands shaking, "or else something terrible happens." I had never heard fear in his voice until then. Not fear of danger, but fear of losing control. "Greg," I said gently, "Liam's safe. He's just playing in his room." He looked up, eyes sharp and haunted. "You don't see it, Rachel. Someone has to protect him. From the world. From everything." That was the first moment I felt a shadow slip between us. I didn't know then how wide it would grow. The air inside our apartment changed long before I admitted it. Liam, once full of shrieks of laughter and endless questions, grew quieter. He watched Greg the way a small animal watches an unpredictable storm, respectfully still, anxiously prepared. I noticed it in the little things, the way Liam flinched when Greg stood up too fast, the way he asked permission to play with toys he used to grab freely, the way he searched my face for reassurance whenever Greg began talking in that clipped, measured tone. The nights were worse. Greg sat up in bed with the glow of his tablet illuminating his face as he read article after article about childhood threats, bacteria, playground injuries, psychological development charts. Sometimes he shook me awake at 2 a.m. "Rachel, did you disinfect Liam's shoes after the playground? They carry parasites. You know that, right?" "He's fine," I whispered, trying to calm him. "Please, just sleep." He never did, not fully. Our neighbor, Denise Harper, was one of the few people I trusted enough to confide in. She lived across the hall, 50-something, retired nurse, sharp-eyed but kind. One afternoon, after Greg had snapped at Liam over a spilled cup of juice, I stepped into the hallway just to breathe. Denise was watering her potted rosemary plant. "You okay, honey?" she asked, eyebrows lifting with gentle concern. I didn't mean to cry, but I did. Quietly, the way women cry when they're terrified of being heard. "Greg's not the same," I whispered. "He's obsessed. Liam's terrified of him." Denise didn't brush it off the way I expected people to. Her face tightened, serious. "You listen to me," she said softly. "What you're describing isn't normal parenting. You need to document everything. And you need to think about getting help. For you and that little boy." I wanted to believe she was overreacting. But that night, Greg created a new schedule for Liam, one with no playdates, no spontaneous activities, no unstructured time. Every minute accounted for, every potential risk crossed out in red pen. When I told him it was too much, he only smiled, a calm, eerie smile. "I'm saving him," he said, "from the pain you can't see." That was the night our home learned to hold its breath. I didn't realize how much fear had settled into my bones until Liam came home from kindergarten with a bruise on his arm. Just a faint one, yellowing around the edges. But when I asked him what happened, he hesitated. "Daddy said, I grabbed the spoon wrong," he whispered. My lungs tightened. Greg had always called his discipline structured, but this was different. Real. Physical. That evening I found myself lying to Greg the way a survivor lies to a captor without fully knowing why. "Liam had a fine day," I said at dinner, carefully neutral. Greg nodded, cutting his chicken with unnerving calm. "Good. He's learning to follow structure. Children need structure." But Liam stared at his plate, shoulders curled inward, barely breathing. I began documenting everything. Whispered voice memos on my phone, photos of bruises, notes on conversations. I hid them in a cloud folder Greg didn't know existed. The guilt of secrecy ate at me, but the alternative felt worse. Denise told me plainly, "Rachel, this isn't anxiety anymore. This is danger." She urged me to call Child Protection Services. I wish I could say I did it right away, but fear makes cowards out of decent people. I worried Greg would find out. I worried Liam would suffer more. But the moment that broke me came 2 weeks later. Liam had a small tantrum. He was tired, hungry, overstimulated. Any child would have had the same outburst. But Greg crouched in front of him, gripping his shoulders too tightly. "Liam," he whispered in that calm, terrifying voice, "if the world hurts you, I have to do what's right. You'll thank me someday." Liam sobbed quietly, and I felt something inside me snap. That night, while Greg showered, I locked myself in our bedroom closet and made the call to Child Protection Services. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. "I think my husband is becoming dangerous," I whispered. "I think my son is in danger." Even saying it aloud felt like betrayal, yet also like escape. I didn't know then the storm that was coming. The intervention came faster than I expected. Apparently, Liam's teacher had also filed a report after noticing his withdrawn behavior, his clinginess, and the tiny marks on his arms. Combined with my documentation, it triggered an immediate response. It was a rainy Wednesday around 6 in the evening. Seattle rain that drummed against the balcony railings and blurred the streetlights. I had just started heating leftovers when there was a firm knock at the door. Greg opened it before I could react. Two social workers stood in the hallway, accompanied by a Seattle police officer. Their badges caught the dim light. "Mr. Lawson," one of them said calmly, "we need to speak with you and your wife." Greg's face shifted. First confusion, then something sharp, brittle. He didn't invite them in. They stepped inside anyway. "Is Liam present?" another asked. "He's fine," Greg snapped. "He's in his room. Why are you here?" "We have received multiple concerns about your son's safety," the social worker explained. "We need to speak with him privately." Greg's voice turned icy. "Absolutely not. My family is not subject to interrogation." But by then, it wasn't his choice. I felt my heart pound as they gently led Liam from his room. He looked so small, clinging to the stuffed dinosaur Greg didn't like him sleeping with. While they spoke to Liam, Greg paced like a caged animal, muttering under his breath. The calm mask he'd worn for years began to crack. "You did this," he hissed at me. "You let strangers into our home." "No, Greg," I whispered, forcing my voice not to shake. "You did this." When the social workers returned, one of them spoke carefully. "Mr. Lawson, based on what we've heard, we are taking emergency protective action. Liam will be placed temporarily with his mother while we conduct a full investigation. You will not be permitted unsupervised contact." Greg's face crumpled, not with sadness, but with rage. "You're making a mistake," he growled. The officer stepped forward. "Sir, I need you to calm down." Greg didn't. And that was the moment the officer put him in cuffs. The apartment felt impossibly quiet afterward, except for Liam's soft sobbing as he pressed himself into my chest. For the first time in years, I felt the sharp edge of hope. Greg's arrest marked the beginning of a long, painful healing process, one I wasn't fully prepared for. Even with him gone, the apartment felt haunted by his voice, his routines, his rules. I found myself moving quietly, automatically bracing for his reactions. Trauma lingers like a shadow. But Liam began to change. The first morning after Greg was taken away, I made pancakes. Messy, imperfect ones that would have made Greg twitch. I let Liam mix the batter, spill flour everywhere, lick syrup off his fingers. And for the first time in months, he giggled. A small sound, fragile and halting, but real. Denise stepped in like a guardian angel, bringing meals, sitting with me while I cried, distracting Liam with stories about her garden and her old nursing days. "You did the right thing," she told me one night as we folded laundry together, "even when it scared you." But healing wasn't linear. Some nights Liam woke up screaming, dreams of Greg scolding him, grabbing him, whispering those chilling promises. I held him through every tremor. "You're safe now," I whispered. "Nothing can hurt you here." Slowly the apartment changed. The walls felt brighter. The silence felt kinder. I donated Greg's mountain of rigid parenting books. I threw away the strict schedules taped to the fridge. I rearranged furniture just to break the pattern of his presence. Therapy helped, both of us. Liam learned that love didn't have to be measured or controlled. I learned that fear doesn't mean failure. It means you survived something worth fearing. Greg was eventually ordered into psychiatric evaluation and long-term separation from us. I don't know if he'll ever understand the damage he did. Maybe it doesn't matter. My life now revolves around healing, not understanding. Some evenings, as the rain taps gently on the windows, Liam curls up beside me with picture books, laughing freely. The warmth slowly returns, drop by drop, like the Seattle sun breaking through after weeks of gray. We are not the same family we once were, but we are a safer one, a freer one. And sometimes, that is enough. When love becomes control and protection becomes fear, it is not love at all. Listening to your instincts, no matter how quietly they speak, can save lives. Courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. I used to think Adam's secrets were charming. He'd dodge questions with a smirk, hide birthday gifts under blankets in the trunk of the car, or tell half-finished stories from his childhood and claim I'd fill in the rest eventually. I married him because he felt safe, steady, even predictable. I never imagined the kind of fear his silence could grow into. When his mother passed, we moved into her old 2-story house on Alder Ridge, tucked behind a sagging picket fence and leaning pines. It wasn't beautiful, but Adam insisted we keep it exactly as she left it. I agreed. Grief makes people cling to strange things. The first few weeks were normal enough. The kitchen smelled like old tea bags, the floorboards creaked like they were complaining, and the upstairs hallway always ran cold. I wrote it off as an old house settling. But Adam changed almost immediately. He avoided one room, the upstairs guest room, like it burned him. He'd pause in front of the door, jaw tight, whispering under his breath. The first time I asked about it, he mumbled, "Storage. Just junk." A week later, I heard coughing from inside the room. A woman's coughing. Weak, thready, like someone who'd been sick for a long time. I froze on the staircase, listening. Adam, downstairs in the living room, didn't react at all. When I asked him about it later, he stared at me like I'd admitted to a crime. "No one is in that room, Sarah," he said flatly. "Don't go near it." I laughed it off then, but the sound inside had felt real, tangible, alive. I didn't know it yet, but that was the first moment the house, and Adam's past, began closing in around me. The next strange thing happened on a rainy Thursday night. I woke to the sound of hammering. Soft, rhythmic, deliberate. Adam wasn't in bed. I followed the noise upstairs, heart thudding. He stood in front of the guest room door with a hammer in one hand and long nails in the other. His hair hung loose around his face, his shirt damp with sweat. He didn't look at me. "Adam, what are you doing?" "Securing it," he muttered. "It needs to be secure." "For who?" He stopped hammering but didn't turn. "Please, Sarah," he whispered. "Just go back to bed." His voice cracked on the last word. I backed away, unsettled. When I returned to the bedroom, I heard him speaking, low, shaky, through the newly boarded door. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." The house felt like it was holding its breath. Days passed. I tried to focus on work, on unpacking boxes, on pretending this wasn't all deeply wrong. But the house didn't let me. At night, I heard crying inside the sealed room. A woman's voice, soft, desperate. Please let me out." I confronted Adam after 3 nights of this. He grabbed my shoulders, panic wild in his eyes. "She's not in there," he insisted. "She can't be. You're imagining it, just like I used to." "Used to?" I asked. But he shut down immediately, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "Don't make me talk about her." Her. I didn't press further then, though every instinct told me I should. Something in him looked fragile, like pulling one more truth from him might shatter whatever was left of his stability. Still, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Whatever was happening in that house, whatever grief or guilt Adam was hiding, it was clawing its way into the present and pulling me with it. The breaking point came when Adam left the house abruptly one evening after a phone call that made him go pale. He grabbed his keys, muttered something about needing air, and sped off before I could ask where he was going. The moment I heard his car disappear down the street, adrenaline surged through me. I grabbed a crowbar from the garage and headed upstairs. Every nail he'd hammered into that door felt like a plea I didn't understand, but I tore them out anyway. The door creaked open. The room was empty. untouched for years. Dust coated the furniture, the wallpaper peeled like old scabs, and the air smelled of nothing but cold and stale wood. The only object out of place was a single wooden chair facing the window. No woman, no footprints, no signs of life. But the chills down my spine didn't ease. Someone had cried in that room. I knew what I'd heard. I searched the room, desperate for answers. When I pushed the dresser away from the wall, something thin and leather-bound slid out from behind it. A diary. The handwriting inside belonged to a woman. Page after page, she wrote about being locked in this room, begging to be let out, apologizing for things she didn't understand, losing track of time, losing track of herself. The final page made my blood freeze. Adam, please don't lock me in again. My mind spun. Adam had been married before. He'd mentioned it only once, vaguely, saying his first wife had died during a hiking trip. He'd never shared details, but she had never lived in this house. So why was her diary here? Why were her words echoing through the walls? And what exactly had Adam locked out, or locked in, for all those years? When Adam came home, I was sitting on the bedroom floor holding the diary like a shield. He stopped in the doorway, eyes darting from the broken boards to my trembling hands. "You went in," he whispered. "Adam, what is this?" I demanded. "Your first wife. Why is her diary here? Why does she say you locked her in?" He stumbled back, collapsing against the wall. "She wasn't here," he croaked. "She never lived here. I hear her. I see her. I caused her death, Sarah. I pushed her too hard. I ignored her depression. She begged me to slow down, and I didn't. And then one day she was gone." He dragged shaking hands through his hair. "I created that room. In my head, a punishment. A prison. I imagined locking her in because I couldn't face what really happened." His voice cracked. "It started after she died. I'd hear her crying behind doors, asking me to let her out, begging me not to leave her alone again. My mother tried to help, but I scared her too. When she died, I thought I could finally move on." He looked up at me, haunted. "But I wasn't ready to love someone again. And when you moved in, I got scared you'd replace her, that you'd disappear too, that I'd lose you the way I lost her." I felt tears sting my eyes, not from pity, but from the raw terror of understanding how deep his break truly ran. "This isn't grief, Adam," I whispered. "This is something darker. You need real help." He shook his head violently. "No one can help me. If they take you away, I'll lose everything again." And for one chilling second, I saw the flicker of someone who might board up more than a door to keep his fear from becoming reality. That was when I knew I had to leave. I waited until Adam fell asleep, fitfully, thrashing against nightmares I couldn't soothe or share. I packed only what I could fit in one small suitcase: my wallet, my phone, a few clothes, and the diary that had revealed the truth. I slipped downstairs, praying the floorboards wouldn't creak. The house felt watchful, as if the walls themselves had learned to listen over the years. Halfway to the front door, I heard footsteps behind me. "Sarah?" His voice was low, disoriented, but close. I didn't turn. "Adam, I'm going to stay with my sister for a while." "You're leaving me," he whispered. A statement, not a question. Just like she did. "I'm not leaving forever," I lied. "But I can't stay here tonight." When he stepped closer, I stepped back. That tiny movement broke something inside him. His face crumpled, then hollowed. "I was trying to keep you safe," he whispered. "Safe from becoming her." "I'm not her," I said gently. "But if I stay, I might end up just as trapped. He didn't follow me. He just stood at the bottom of the staircase, staring at the guest room door, now hanging open like an exposed wound. I drove into town and called emergency services from a gas station parking lot. I told them everything. His hallucinations, the danger of his delusions, the fear that he might hurt himself or me without meaning to. They brought him in for psychiatric evaluation the next morning. I didn't return to the house on Alder Ridge, not even to pack. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed again. Some rooms were never meant to be entered at all. But I still think about that chair facing the window, and the apologies whispered to no one, and the woman he could never set free, even after death. Unresolved guilt can become a prison, one that traps not only the person suffering, but everyone who loves them. Seeking help is not a weakness. It is the first step toward breaking the cycle that pain tries to repeat. When we married, he was just serious. He liked order. He liked rules. He liked predictability in a world too messy for his comfort. That used to feel like security. We lived on a quiet back road in northern Michigan, tucked between tall pines that swayed like sentinels. Winters always hit hard, but the cold never truly bothered us, until the winter when everything changed. Grant had been laid off from his construction job 6 months earlier, and the loss carved something sharp inside him. He spent days pacing the house, running his fingers along the walls, checking the locks repeatedly, as if he expected the world to break in at any second. At first, I thought he was restless. Anyone would be, after losing a job. But then he began insisting someone was watching us from the tree line. He'd stand at the window for hours, staring into the woods, breath fogging the glass. "They know we're vulnerable now," he muttered one evening. "Who?" I asked gently. He didn't answer, just walked away, shaking his head like I wasn't worth explaining it to. Soon he added 4 locks to every door and taped the curtains shut. Nights grew quieter because Lily, our 9-year-old, barely dared to breathe. When I'd find kitchen knives missing or tools hidden, Grant would test me later. "Notice anything off?" I'd lie and say no because honesty only made him look at me like I'd joined the imaginary threat. It was still early winter then. I didn't know the worst was coming. By mid-December, Grant barely resembled the husband I knew. Sleep slipped away from him like melting snow, and with every hour he stayed awake, something inside him twisted tighter. He told me the voices outside were louder at night. He swore he saw movement near the shed. I checked, of course. There was nothing there but frost and moonlight. One evening, I found him sitting on the couch in total darkness, elbows on his knees, listening to the vents. "They're using the ducts to track us," he said without looking up. "There's no one in the ducts, Grant," I whispered. He finally turned toward me, his face pale in the dim light. "You don't hear it? Scraping, whispering. You should be paying more attention." His words made my stomach drop. I knew then he wasn't just stressed. He was convinced of a world I couldn't reach. Lily started asking questions in hushed tones, like the house itself might overhear her. "Why is Dad acting weird?" she whispered while brushing her teeth one night. "He's just tired," I lied, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Adults get overwhelmed sometimes." She nodded but didn't look convinced. The worst moment came after I suggested he speak to someone, a counselor, a doctor, anyone. His expression darkened immediately. "You want to hand me over to them?" he said. "I knew it. I knew you were slipping." "No," I insisted, heart pounding. "I just want you to feel safe." He stepped closer until his breath touched my cheek. "I'll never be safe if you keep siding with them." For a moment I thought he might shove me. Instead he turned and walked away, muttering to himself. That night I slept with my bedroom door locked. It was the first time I realized I might need a plan. January arrived with the kind of cold that crawled into your bones. The house popped and creaked under the freezing temperature, but to Grant, every sound was a threat. I woke one night to the thunder of boots on the stairs. My heart raced before I even opened my eyes. His silhouette filled the bedroom doorway. The hall light behind him cast long shadows across the room. In his hand was the crowbar he kept in the shed. "Grant," I whispered, shielding Lily behind me. "What are you doing?" His voice trembled with conviction. "They're in the walls. I heard them moving again." "There's no one in the walls. It's the house settling." He shook his head violently. "You're lying." Before I could stop him, he swung the crowbar into the drywall. The crack echoed like a gunshot. Plaster dust burst into the air, coating the floor in white powder. Lily cried as debris fell around us. "Grant, stop!" I yelled. He tore deeper, ripping open a jagged wound in the wall. When it was big enough for him to crouch and peer inside, he aimed a flashlight into the darkness. "See? Look!" he insisted. "Right there! Movement!" I forced myself to kneel beside him, even though my knees shook. "Grant, there's nothing." He stared into the cavity for a long moment. Then he turned to me slowly, suspicion growing in his eyes. "Funny how you never see it." He finally dropped the crowbar, but the damage was done. To the house, to Lily, to our sense of safety. He spent the next morning boarding the hole shut, muttering about buying time. I knew then that whatever was coming, I needed to protect our daughter, even if it meant protecting her from her own father. By late January, Grant slept in scattered, frantic bursts, 20 minutes here, 10 minutes there. Most nights he wandered outside in the snow, circling the house like a guard dog too exhausted to rest. I'd wake to tapping on the windows. 3 taps, a pause, 3 more. Once, when I pulled back the curtain, his face was inches from the glass. "You're supposed to stay alert," he told me calmly, as if this was normal. That week, I began packing essentials in secret, a tote buried in my car trunk. Lily's boots, our documents, medications. I prayed I'd never need it, but deep down, I knew I would. Then the blizzard hit. The wind roared like a creature alive, snow slamming sideways across the yard. Lily and I were in the living room when Grant stormed in from the basement, shotgun gripped tight in his hands. "They're coming tonight," he said, voice shaking with adrenaline. "We have to protect ourselves." Lily hid behind me, sobbing. My voice trembled. "Grant, the gun. Please, just put it down." He didn't hear me. He dragged a dresser across the floor and slammed it against the front door. "You two stay here. If they breach the entry, don't move." I knew then that something terrible would happen if I didn't act. I knelt beside Lily. "Get your coat," I whispered. Quietly. Grant was shouting warnings at invisible enemies as we slipped out the back door. Snow swallowed our footsteps instantly. The wind stung our faces, but I didn't stop. Not until we reached our neighbor's porch, half a mile down the road, frozen and shaking. Tom opened the door before I even knocked twice. One look at us, and he reached for the phone. The sheriff arrived within minutes. I held Lily as she cried, knowing our lives had just split in two. When the sheriff returned from our house, he said he found Grant barricaded inside, shouting at the walls with the unloaded shotgun still in his hands. He didn't resist, didn't fight. He just kept insisting the voices would return if he stopped guarding the house. They took him gently. That broke me more than anger would have. At the hospital, psychiatrists diagnosed him with severe paranoid delusion, fueled by stress, sleep deprivation, and long-term isolation. They told me it wasn't my fault. They told me I had done the right thing by leaving. But guilt doesn't listen to doctors. By spring, Lily and I had moved into my sister's home. She slept better, though she'd still flinch at the sound of footsteps in the hallway. I tried to rebuild our routines, school drop-offs, laundry, quiet dinners, but part of me stayed stuck in that winter, listening for tapping on the windows that wasn't there. I visited Grant a few times. On good days, he recognized me and asked about Lily with a softness that almost made me forget. On bad days, He stared past me like I was part of the danger he'd spent months trying to escape. "It wasn't real," I whispered to him once. "None of it." He blinked slowly. "It felt real." I squeezed his hand. "I know. Sometimes on cold nights when the house sighs and the wind scrapes against the siding, I still hear phantom footsteps, heavy, tired, looping the perimeter like he used to. I know it's just memory, or maybe trauma has its own echo. Either way, I listen, remind myself we're safe now, and let the sound fade. Some winters stay with you. When someone you love loses themselves to fear, you cannot sacrifice your safety trying to rescue them. Protecting your family is not abandonment, it's courage, compassion, and survival. People like to say every marriage starts with a dream, but mine started with a sense of safety. Daniel was the kind of man mothers trusted instinctively. Steady job, soft voice, good posture, the kind of guy who held the door without turning it into a performance. I met him when I was 23, and exhausted with dating men who lived like stray dogs. Daniel felt like the opposite of chaos. We bought a small house outside Columbus, and for the first few years, life moved quietly, maybe too quietly. It wasn't until after our daughter Lily was born that something shifted in him. It was subtle at first. He'd stand by the living room window for long stretches, watching neighbors walk their dogs or unload groceries. I'd ask what he was staring at, and he'd say, "Just checking the street. You never know who's out there." I assumed fatherhood had made him cautious, but then he started saying strange things. He'd mention the girl across the street, Jenna, a college sophomore, like he knew her personally. "She's been sad this week," he'd say, tapping his finger on the window glass. "You can tell from the way she walks." I told him he was imagining things, but he'd just smile tight, like he knew something I didn't. At night, I'd wake to the creak of floorboards. Daniel would be standing in the hallway, barefoot, staring into the darkness. Sometimes he stood outside Lily's door, head tilted like he was listening to something only he could hear. "She breathes unevenly," he said once. "It could mean asthma. I'm keeping her safe." I wanted to believe him. I needed to. But the man I married, the predictable, gentle Daniel, was slipping away, replaced by someone who felt like a stranger wearing his face. The first time I found the notebook, I wasn't even looking for it. I had dropped one of Lily's toys and watched it roll under our bed, settling right against a loose board I'd never noticed. When I pried it up, expecting dust and maybe a spider, I found something else entirely. A thin black notebook with frayed corners, the kind teenagers use for doodles. But this wasn't doodles. It was names. Women's names. In looping, deliberate handwriting. Half the women lived on our street. There were notes next to some of them. "Hair smells like citrus. Walks alone at 7:40 p.m. Seems lonely." I felt my stomach sink, slow and heavy. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the notebook. When Daniel came home that night, smiling the same polite smile he used on neighbors, I hid it in my purse and tried to breathe normally. At dinner he asked, "You seemed quiet today. Everything okay?" "Just tired," I lied. "Work stuff." He nodded, but his eyes lingered too long, as if he could see the truth pressed against my ribs. A week later, 2 husbands from down the block came to our door. One of them, a tall guy named Mark, asked why Daniel had been hanging around his wife's car every morning. Daniel stepped outside, chuckled like it was all a misunderstanding. And then something in him snapped. His face twisted, and he lunged forward, shouting so loudly the porch railing rattled. It took everything I had to pull him back inside. When he calmed, he insisted he didn't remember any of it. He looked terrified, but not in a way that made me want to comfort him, more like someone cornered, calculating. That night, I slept with the notebook clutched to my chest, realizing I no longer knew the man who slept beside me. It was early spring when everything sharpened into something undeniable. One night I woke at 3 a.m. and noticed Daniel wasn't in bed. The house felt too silent, like it was holding its breath. I checked Lily first. She was asleep, soft and safe under her blankets. Then I looked out the back window and saw the beam of a flashlight swing across the lawn. Daniel was out there barefoot again, digging. The hole was rectangular, deep, too precise for gardening. I slid open the back door, the air cold against my throat. "Daniel?" I called, trying to keep my voice steady. He kept digging. "What are you doing?" He finally turned, sweat dripping down his temples despite the cold. "I'm planting a garden bed," he said too quickly. "For tomatoes. You don't garden, and tomatoes need sunlight. This is the darkest corner of the yard." He stared at me, breathing heavily, his shovel held upright like a weapon. For a moment I thought he would lie again, but instead he smiled, slow, unsettling. "You never take my interest seriously." I backed up a step, not because of the words, but because of the tone. Detached, cold. Later that morning, I went back to look at the hole. It was almost exactly the size of an adult body. The shape was too intentional. I filled half of it myself before work, refusing to leave it open. But the worst part wasn't the hole. It was the feeling that Daniel was preparing for something he believed was necessary, and something he wouldn't explain. That night, he kissed me on the forehead and said, "You worry too much. One day you'll see I've always been protecting this family." His eyes did not match his words. Even now, I don't know why I opened the boxes in the garage. Maybe instinct, maybe fear, maybe the way Daniel had started locking the door and hiding the key like a teenager with something to protect. One afternoon, while he was out running errands, I found the key taped behind the water heater. I expected tools or old photographs. What I found instead stopped my breath. Boxes lined neatly on a shelf, each labeled with a name I recognized from the notebook under the floorboard. Inside were objects, small, intimate, unmistakably stolen. A pair of earrings, a silk scarf, a hairbrush with strands of auburn hair tangled in the bristles, lip balm, a single glove, trophies. I touched one box and immediately jerked my hand away, as if the items could burn me. My mind raced with questions. How long had he been collecting these? How had no one noticed? And what did he plan to do next? I heard the garage door click. Daniel's footsteps. I shoved the lid back on the nearest box and stepped away just as he walked in. He looked from me to the shelf, and something flickered in his expression. Panic, then anger, then something much darker settling in his eyes. "What are you doing in here?" he asked quietly. "I was looking for paint," I said. Even I didn't believe my voice. He took a slow step toward me. "You shouldn't be in places you don't understand." The room felt too small, the air too thin. I pushed past him and hurried to the house. He didn't follow. He just watched me with that blank, calculating stare, like a man deciding what to do with a problem he wasn't ready to solve. That night, I locked Lily's door from the inside and slept sitting upright, knowing that whatever Daniel was becoming, I could no longer pretend it was stress or exhaustion. It was something far more dangerous. I didn't leave all at once. I planned quietly, slowly, because by then I knew Daniel watched everything. My phone, my movements, my expressions. I made copies of important documents at work. I hid cash in Lily's stuffed animals. I told neighbors I might be traveling soon so they wouldn't question seeing my car packed. The breaking point came one night when I heard Daniel whispering through Lily's door. His voice was soft, rhythmic, like a lullaby gone wrong. I stepped into the hall and saw him kneeling there, his palm flat against the wood. "What are you doing?" I whispered. He didn't turn around. Her breathing changed again. She's scared. Kids know when something's coming. My heart pounded so hard I thought he could hear it. "Daniel, go to bed." He finally stood, slowly, like he was surfacing from a trance. But before he walked past me, he said, "You need to stop interfering. It makes things harder." The next morning, I took Lily to daycare early. I told them it was an emergency work shift. Then I drove to the house, grabbed 2 bags I'd packed, and left. I didn't explain. I didn't leave a note. I simply drove until the city disappeared in the rearview mirror. Within 24 hours, I was in a women's shelter 3 counties away, signing papers, shaking so badly the pen kept slipping. When I told the counselor everything, she didn't question a single word. She simply said, "You did the right thing leaving." Daniel never came after us, not physically at least, but some nights I still see him in my dreams, standing in the yard, shovel in hand, staring at the place where the hole used to be. And I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't left when I did. I believed love, marriage, meant I knew Tommy better than anyone. Back then, our life looked like something straight out of a family magazine. The kids laughed easily, I worked comfortably from home, and Tommy kissed my forehead every morning before work, like it was routine and sacred all at once. When we moved into our 2-story brick home at 56 Willowbrook Street, I honestly thought we were beginning our happiest chapter. The yard smelled of eucalyptus every time the wind picked up. Our daughter Chloe drew chalk flowers on the driveway. Lucas chased butterflies barefoot through the grass, giggling when they escaped him. I remember looking at Tommy on the porch one evening thinking, we made it. We really did. But the shift came quietly. At first it was questions. Too many questions. Where were you? Who did you talk to? Why did it take you 15 minutes to get milk? He said it playfully, but his eyes were sharp, checking my answers for cracks. Then came the phone monitoring. The tone of his voice changed. The softness disappeared. I chalked it up to stress, his job, his mother's failing health, anything but the truth I didn't want to see. When he scolded Chloe one evening for picking the wrong dress, his voice slicing through the hallway like a whip, I swallowed my worry. I hugged her afterward, whispering that Daddy was tired. But I wasn't fooling anyone, not even myself. Something inside our home had shifted. The warmth was still there on the outside, but the inside had begun to cool, 1 degree at a time. And the scariest part was realizing how easy it was to get used to the cold. The silence was the first prison we found ourselves in, not the kind built with walls or locks. Something worse. A silence too careful, too rehearsed, where every word had to be measured like stepping stones across thin ice. Dinner became the worst part of the day. Tommy demanded perfection for even the smallest things. The plates arranged just so, the napkins folded neatly, the salt shaker placed exactly in front of his dominant hand. If anything felt off, his voice snapped like a sudden storm. "Pass the salt properly," he barked one night. I slipped up. I reached too quickly. The metal clanged louder than it should have. His glare froze me in place. Chloe dropped her fork. Lucas balled up under the table like he wanted to disappear. Afterward, I found Lucas hiding under his bed, clutching his stuffed kangaroo, whispering, "Daddy's mad. Daddy's mad." I didn't have the heart to tell him he wasn't wrong. Tommy's control seeped into every corner of life. He monitored my emails, just checking for scams, he claimed. He insisted on knowing my passwords, safety reasons. He critiqued my freelance work like he was my boss. "This is sloppy, Olivia," he said, holding one of my design drafts. "You're better than this. Redo it." And I did, every time. Karen, our neighbor, waved cheerfully over the fence, saying things like, "You're lucky to have such a devoted husband." I learned to smile back, holding a picture-perfect mask she never questioned. The truth? I avoided telling anyone because I kept hoping, praying, that I was wrong, that maybe he would go back to the man I married. that maybe I wasn't failing at keeping our family together. But deep down, I felt something unraveling. Not just in him, in me. My tiny acts of rebellion started with things no one would ever notice. A hidden folder on my laptop, a private journal under the false bottom of my dresser drawer, an email to a counselor I deleted from my inbox immediately after sending. It wasn't courage, not yet. It was survival. The kids learned to move quietly, like shadows. Chloe tiptoed down the hall to avoid Tommy's attention. Lucas flinched when he heard footsteps, even gentle ones. I soothed them at night, whispering that everything would be okay, even when I had no idea if it was true. One night, Chloe spilled juice on the living room carpet. A tiny accident, one any normal parent would shrug off. But Tommy stormed in, face flushed, eyes sharp. "Do you know how lucky you are I'm not punishing you?" he snapped. "Control yourself. The world won't care if you mess up." Chloe froze, tears forming but held back out of fear. When Tommy left the room, she broke down in my arms. I held her until she fell asleep. Later, I wrote everything down. His words, his behavior, the way Chloe trembled. Documentation felt like the only weapon I had. I sent the files to my sister with a simple message. "Keep these safe for me." She called immediately, her voice tight with worry. "Liv, you need to leave." "I know," I whispered, "but not yet. I need to plan." Every step had to be invisible, every move calculated. I couldn't let Tommy see the shift in me. Even my breaths became measured, because once a man like him senses he's losing control, you never know what he might do to get it back. Fear has a way of sharpening everything. Your senses, your instincts, your awareness of danger. By early spring, the tension in the house felt like a taut wire vibrating under the surface of every moment. Tommy's mood swings grew sharper. Some evenings he played the loving father, insisting we watch a family-appropriate film together. Other nights he prowled the house like he was searching for an invisible flaw only he could see. "Did you move my keys?" "No." "Don't lie to me." "I'm not lying." Even breathing felt like an accusation. The kids withdrew further. Chloe stopped drawing. Lucas slept with his stuffed kangaroo clutched so tight it left marks on his hands. I started sleeping lightly, always listening for his footsteps. One night, after a long stretch of control and unpredictability, Tommy fell asleep on the couch with the TV still flickering. His snores echoed softly through the quiet house. I stood there watching him, my heart pounding. Something in me finally snapped into clarity. I went upstairs and gently woke Chloe and Lucas. "Sweethearts," I whispered, kneeling beside them. "We're leaving." "Now?" Chloe asked, eyes wide. "Yes, right now." Lucas grabbed his kangaroo and nodded. We crept through the dark house together, careful not to wake him. Every creak of the floorboard felt like thunder, but somehow we made it to the car. I buckled them in, started the engine with shaking hands, and drove away without looking back. I didn't go far, just to the nearest 24-hour community center. But for the first time in years, I felt air in my lungs. Real air. Clean air. I texted my sister. "It's time." Then I called for help. The next weeks were blurry, full of police reports, counseling sessions, and legal steps that felt impossible and necessary all at once. The staff at the Family Crisis Center treated us gently, like we had been fragile long before we realized it ourselves. Tommy, of course, tried everything. Charm, threats, promises, tears. His desperation spilled out in frantic messages. "Come home. We can fix this." "You're overreacting. You made me act that way. I love you. Don't ruin our family." But I didn't respond. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to his control. I was choosing something else. Freedom. Chloe slowly began to bloom again. She drew pictures of blue skies and kangaroos and a house with no shadows. Lucas talked without whispering. He laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. As for me, I learned how to breathe without fear, how to trust my instincts again, how to look in the mirror and recognize the woman staring back. We didn't return to 56 Willowbrook Street. That house belonged to a past I was done surviving. Instead, we found a small rental with peeling wallpaper and noisy pipes, but it was ours, safe, quiet, untouched by control or anger. The kids decorated their rooms however they wanted. I bought the first dress in years without worrying if someone else approved. Healing isn't fast. It isn't tidy. Sometimes it still hurts. But every day, a little piece of us comes back. And every night before bed, I say the same thing to the kids. You're safe now. Truly, finally safe. People always imagine danger as something loud, an explosion, a scream, a slammed door. But looking back, the real danger in my marriage started quietly, like a draft slipping under a closed window. When I met Grant, he was the type of man you could rely on. Steady hands, firm opinions, and a work ethic that bordered on obsession. His seriousness felt comforting to me then. I grew up in a house full of noise and mess, so a man who liked order seemed like a gift. For years, we lived a simple life in northern Michigan. Long winters, small-town routines, nights drinking cocoa while Lily colored at the kitchen table. Grant worked construction and came home tired but gentle. He taught Lily how to build birdhouses from scrap wood. He hugged me from behind while I cooked. If someone had told me he'd one day tear apart our home searching for imaginary intruders, I would have laughed. Grant was grounded, practical, unshakable. But in the spring of 2021, the layoffs came. His company downsized, and he was let go with barely a thank you. I watched something dim inside him that day. It wasn't dramatic, just a small shift in his eyes, like a pilot light flickering. By fall, the long silence of unemployment had settled over him like a heavy coat. He started pacing the house, stopping at windows for long stretches. I'd find him standing in the hall with his ear pressed to the wall. When I'd ask what he was doing, he'd say, "Listening. Someone's messing with us." At first, I told myself it was stress. Anyone can unravel a little when life turns upside down. But the more I tried to reassure him, the more suspicious he became. Small things went missing. Keys, Lily's scissors, my phone charger. When I asked about them, he'd look at me sharply and say, "Funny that you'd ask." I didn't realize it then, but Grant was already slipping into a world I couldn't pull him back from. Winter in northern Michigan has its own kind of hush. Thick, cold, heavy. That year, the snow started early, and the silence inside our house doubled. Grant had become obsessed with securing the property. He spent hours adding extra locks to our doors, not one or two, 4 on each. He installed window alarms from a hardware store and taped the curtains shut because they're watching from the tree line. "Who's watching?" I asked one night as he hammered a latch onto the back door. He didn't look up. "People. You'd know if you paid attention." I tried to keep my voice calm. "Grant, there's no one out there. We've lived here for years. It's just the woods." He stopped hammering. Slowly, he turned to me, eyes dark and hollow. "You're too trusting. That's dangerous." His paranoia started bleeding into every part of our life. He'd quiz me about where I'd gone, what I'd touched, what I'd heard. If I didn't answer fast enough, his expression tightened, as if he were analyzing inconsistencies in my story. Lily, only 9, learned to make herself small. She'd tiptoe from her room to the kitchen, whispering, "Is Dad okay today?" I'd force a smile and say, "He's just tired," though I knew she didn't believe me. Then came the night I found him sitting in the dark living room, staring at the wall as if someone were whispering secrets through it. The glow from the street lamp made his face look older, drawn. "They're inside," he murmured. "Who?" "Grant, stop. You're scaring me." He blinked slowly, like he was waking from a trance. "Don't pretend you don't hear it. Scratching, moving. They've been tunneling." I touched his arm and felt him trembling. Not from fear, something deeper, more frantic. That was the moment I realized I wasn't dealing with stress or anger. My husband was breaking apart in front of me, and the cracks were widening faster than I could fill them. The night everything truly shifted was colder than it should have been. The house creaked under the weight of winter, and I had finally managed to fall asleep when a heavy thud shook the staircase. I bolted upright. Lily sat up too, wide-eyed, clutching her blanket. Grant's silhouette filled the bedroom doorway. He was breathing hard, boots still on, snow crusted around the soles. In his right hand, he held the crowbar from the shed. My voice came out thin. "Grant, what's wrong?" His eyes glimmered with a feverish certainty. "They're in the walls," he whispered. "I heard them moving. They're coming closer." Lily whimpered behind me. I stepped in front of her instinctively. "There's no one in the walls," I said gently. "You're exhausted. Let's go downstairs and—" He didn't wait. He jammed the crowbar into the hallway drywall and ripped it open. The sound was like bones snapping. Plaster exploded across the floor, coating his boots, dust swirling like smoke. Lily cried harder, clutching my shirt. "Grant, stop!" I shouted. He swung again, widening the hole until it was large enough for a grown man to crawl through. He leaned in, shining a flashlight into the dark cavity between the studs. "Do you hear it now?" he demanded, sweat dripping from his forehead. "No," I said firmly, "because there's nothing there." He glared at me with suspicion so sharp it made my stomach twist. "You always defend them. Why?" When he finally dropped the crowbar, his hands were shaking. He paced the hall for nearly an hour while I wiped plaster off Lily's face, whispering that everything would be okay, even though I wasn't sure it would. The next morning, he boarded the opening with plywood, muttering that it wouldn't fool them for long. That was when I started sleeping with my phone hidden under my pillow, just in case. By the following week, Grant had stopped sleeping entirely. Nights became a blur of footsteps thudding across the porch, the back door clicking open and shut, and the distant crunch of his boots circling the house in endless loops. Sometimes I'd hear tapping on the windows, 3 light taps, a pause, then 3 more. When I opened the curtains once, he jumped back from the glass. "Perimeter check," he said, chest rising and falling. "You startled me." "You're scaring us," I said quietly. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If you cared about this family, you'd help me watch. You don't get how serious this is." "I care," I whispered. "But you need help." He stepped back as if I'd slapped him. "Doctors can't be trusted. You know that." I didn't know that, but arguing only made him spiral further. I started packing small things in secret. An extra pair of boots for Lily, our important documents, phone chargers, medicine. I hid everything in a tote bag in my car, buried under grocery bags so Grant wouldn't question it. Leaving felt like betrayal, but staying felt like gambling with our lives. Then came the blizzard. Wind screamed around the house like a living thing. Snow slammed against the windows hard enough to make them shudder. I was in the living room with Lily when Grant burst in from the basement, shotgun in hand. "They're coming tonight," he said. "I heard them in the vents." Lily ran to me, trembling. "Grant, put the gun down," I pleaded. "Please." He ignored me and shoved a dresser against the front door. "They can't get through if we hold them off." My throat tightened. Something inside me settled, cold and certain. This was no longer fear. This was survival. I pulled Lily close and whispered, Get your coat. Quietly. She nodded, tears streaking her cheeks. Grant was shouting at the walls when we slipped out the back door. The wind swallowed the sound behind us. Snow stung our faces as we trudged down the road, the storm blurring everything into white shapes. I held Lily's hand so tightly her glove bunched against her wrist. She kept looking back, whispering, "What about Dad?" Every few steps. "We're going to get him help," I said, breath steaming. "But we have to get safe first." Half a mile in a blizzard feels like 10 miles. By the time we reached the neighbor's porch, my legs were numb and Lily's teeth were chattering. The couple living there, Tom and his wife Marion, threw open the door the second they saw us. I didn't have to say more than, "It's Grant," before Tom grabbed the phone and called the sheriff. Deputies arrived in trucks with chains on the tires. They told Tom to keep us inside and warm while they headed toward our house. I sat with Lily on Marion's couch, wrapped in a blanket, listening to her soft crying. I felt guilt and relief braided together in my chest. I didn't want Grant hurt. I didn't want him alone. But I also knew we couldn't stay in that house one more night. When the sheriff came back, he said they found Grant barricaded inside, shouting at voices only he could hear. The shotgun, thankfully, wasn't loaded. They took him gently, he said. Not fighting, just lost. Later, doctors diagnosed him with severe paranoid delusions, worsened by stress, isolation, and sleep deprivation. They said it could happen to anyone under the wrong pressures. That frightened me more than anything. Lily and I moved into my sister's house when spring came. I visit Grant sometimes. On good days, he recognizes me. On bad days, he looks past me like I'm part of the danger he tried so hard to fight. And on certain winter nights, when the wind rattles the eaves and the house settles with a deep, old groan, I swear I hear the echo of his boots in the hallway, searching for threats that never existed.